This next question, we didn't have the person submit their name, but they wanted to know, how do you overcome racial disparities in private practice? So, overcome racial disparities in private practice. Well, let me just start with, I am a straight white male. I have a ton of privilege, and there are some amazing thought leaders that are out there. We did a series in June of 2020 called Black Leaders Matter. I would highly recommend going back to that series because I interviewed, I almost said in something like in vinegar. I interviewed a whole bunch of Black leaders that were teaching on this very topic. So we dove super deep. So I'm going to be speaking about how I view it from my own lens, but please do your own work. Make sure you are finding your own resources beyond just me. I am not the authority, and this is not my major specialty. But I'll just talk through kind of how I think about this and how I'm growing. And I'm sure that we're all at a different phase in our own process in regards to addressing racial disparities. I'm not sure 100% what kind of mind frame or kind of approach this person that asked the question is coming from. And so it could be that they're saying like access to mental health services. It could be cost of mental health service. It could be location. In the same way that there's food deserts in parts of the country where it's a city, but there's no grocery store that's close enough for people to easily get their own groceries. There's probably mental health deserts all over the place. And so I'm going to be making some assumptions from this one question this person made that may or may not be accurate as to what they were actually asking. So I'm just starting with that. So first, I would say looking at my own privilege, looking at my own opportunities, and just understanding that a lot of where I'm at in life is due to other people's actions or inactions. So even the fact that I had parents that set aside money for me to go to college, so that I didn't have a bunch of student loan debt, that I was able to get into the colleges of my choice. That I had a father that had gone to University of Michigan. My mom had gone to Eastern Michigan. That I was able to go to a private Catholic school. I was set up in a number of ways. And so I think first starting with yourself and saying, how have you been set up for success positively? But then also, what are things from your own life that maybe didn't set you up for success? Were you raised in a way that's different from how you would want to raise your kids? Were there things that happened to you? I think if you know yourself and where you're coming from, you're going to do less harm than if you don't know yourself. I mean, I remember when I did the Black Leaders Matter series, some things blew up online that were really hurtful, saying that I shouldn't be leading a Black Leaders Matter series and I shouldn't be having Black people come onto the show and teach me, a white guy. And it was a lot of kind of recently woke people that they felt like they wanted to come after me. Uh, I would expect that. I would go into these things where you can be as grounded as you can be, where you can go in with the heart that you intend, that you can also recognize that you may unnecessarily and inadvertently do damage. And so I would say tread lightly, especially if you're a person of privilege. Realize that there are decision makers all over your community. And identifying who those decision makers are is really important to figure out who are the access managers, who are the decision makers, is there diversity there? Can you advocate for more diversity on boards of directors, on insurance boards, on local counseling groups? So making sure that you have that eye. I've even noticed that in next level practice, oftentimes when we do just like, unmute yourself and say something. If too many white men are jumping in because they feel like, there's nothing against them, but it's just that they feel like they can just speak first. I try to encourage in that community. All right, if you're someone that maybe doesn't always jump in first, go ahead and jump in. You're invited. Like I'm trying to find that role to pull people in. So figuring out in your own community around disparities in private practice, like where can you pull people in and ask people to come along? Next, I would also challenge you to think about not starting from scratch. Where are people already doing good work? There may be nonprofits, there may be therapists, there may be teachers or speakers in your community that are more knowledgeable than you, that you can support their work, that you can hold their work up, that you can use their work as an example and use your privilege, whatever that may look like, to help them. I mean, that was part of when I did the Black Leaders Matter series. Was I wanted to use the platform that I have, the audience that I have, to give a spotlight to people that maybe don't always get the spotlight, and to really evaluate in myself, how do I choose team members? How do I look through what I want to decide? How do I make sure there's diverse voices telling me what I think, helping me understand different perspectives, challenging me, and giving permission to my audience to do that, so that we can all grow? Because it's easy for any of us in any situation to kind of get into our silos and to not think deeply about how we can change things. I think another thing that I think through is that there's a lot of injustice in the world. And I think sometimes people can feel paralyzed by the amount of injustice. And I would just encourage you to find your corner of where you can advocate. For me, I've been to Haiti 3 times. Haiti's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. Getting people microloans there was a big part of some of the volunteer work I did behind the scenes that I haven't talked about a lot in Practice of the Practice. And so being able to fundraise to give these Haitian women $100 loans where they could buy a big thing of rice that they could then resell and make $200, and then they could buy more rice, and then they could have $400, and then they could pay for their kids' schooling, and they could pay back the loan. To me, that was really important. Having traveled so much to the developing world and seeing how half the world doesn't even have clean water. Our toilet water is cleaner than most of the world's water. That was one of the corners that I chose for a long period of time. And so it could be your own community, it could be your own business, it could be somewhere else, it could be in the environment. That Yes, we're talking about racial disparities, and we definitely need to dig into that. And there's some things I'm going to say about that. But I think finding your corner where you can really say, this is where I'm going to sit and I'm going to advocate for a while. As a professional, that's really important to look at. Um, Lastly, I would say evaluating racial disparities in private practice, I would look at your own caseload and the access in your area. I mean, so there can be a lot of different things. So if you just even look at Medicaid, for example, Medicaid, uh, oftentimes what we see is that people will not stay on Medicaid as a provider because of what it pays, because of the paperwork, because of all the hoops. And then we see that people that are lower income don't have access to nearly as many quality therapists, and they can't pay out of pocket. I remember when I worked in Kalamazoo, I had a number of clients that were on Medicaid, and even just getting to the session. Uh, so sometimes there's extra legwork I had to put in to help them have a taxi that came and got them through their insurance company that they weren't responsible for paying for. It can be some extra effort, and so figuring out, do I want a handful of clients to be able to kind of put time and energy into my community to offer more mental health access? That could be something that you could do. It could be advocating for different things. It could be presenting on how to make it easier for Medicaid providers so that more quality people want to be on the Medicaid provider list. There's a number of different things that you can do to push back against that mental health desert that sometimes happens. So I'm sure that there are lots of ideas and other things. Feel free to share. Find me on Facebook, and let's start a conversation there, or on Instagram. I'm very active on both of those platforms, and within our Next Level Practice community, a ton of people are involved in that and talking about all sorts of these types of issues. So we'd love to hear your feedback. I am not the end all in regards to any of these topics. We often say in Next Level Practice, we're stronger as a community in brainstorming together than any one of us could ever be. So if you want to leave a question for me, just go over to practiceofthepractice.com/ask Joe. And you can drop your question there. You can drop your name if you want and your private practice. I'll give you a shout out as to where you are and who you are. Also, this podcast today is sponsored by pillarsofpractice.com. Pillars of Practice is our free e-course for people starting a practice. There's one course for them. And for people growing a practice, there's another one for them. So head on over to pillarsofpractice.com. You'll get access to that teachable content totally free, 100% free. So pillarsofpractice.com is the place to go. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. I'll talk to you soon.